Hello and welcome to Provoking Tech. I'm Zach, and in today's video I'm going to be looking at the effect of Meltdown on cloud gaming. So in the last couple weeks, if you follow a lot of tech tubers or read a lot of tech news, you've likely have heard about Meltdown and how early estimates have put the performance impact on your computing task anywhere between 5 to 30%. Since then, some reports have reported, use cases much higher than that, and also use cases much closer to that 5% minimum. And this is due in part based upon the age of the hardware, but also the computing tasks that you're performing with data center type applications that have a lot of calls through the kernel being impacted on a heavier level, and gaming isn't expected to be impacted too heavily. However, since cloud gaming is kind of a bridge between a data center type application and traditional gaming where you have a single user on a single piece of hardware in most use cases, with cloud gaming you have a shared environment where multiple users will be on the same physical hardware in most use cases. So this could have a much larger impact on cloud gaming than it would on traditional gaming. So today's video is going to look at if that is the case, how big of an impact that we're looking at here, and if it's something that we should really worry about and dig deeper into in the near future. So without further delay, let's go ahead and jump right to it. In the introduction, I already mentioned that cloud gamers could experience a higher level of performance impact versus traditional gamers simply due to the fact that cloud gaming generally puts the users in a multi-user environment in terms of hardware. However, when researching Meltdown deeper to produce this video, I found a very interesting blog post on the Microsoft website, and I've also looked at a lot of different benchmarks that other sites have published to kind of correlate the data that they have found with what Microsoft is saying, and I've come across some very interesting information, especially for cloud gamers. So just to summarize everything that Microsoft has found here real quick, on Windows 10 on newer silicon, that is 2016 era CPUs and newer, so Skylake and newer, benchmarks are only showing about a single digit impact on their performance, and Microsoft is not expecting that this slowdown will be really noticeable by the end users in most use cases. On Windows 10 as well as Windows 7 and 8 on older silicon, so 2015 and older, that's Haswell and older, benchmarks are showing more significant slowdowns, and Microsoft will expect or is expecting that end users will notice this decrease in system performance. Where things get really interesting for cloud gaming is this last bullet point that Microsoft has outlined here. So Windows Server on any silicon, especially in any I/O intensive application, shows a more significant performance impact when you enable the mitigations. So essentially, when you enable the patches, especially on I/O intensive applications, which means cloud gaming might not be as impacted as bad as something like a data center application, there is more significant performance impacts though in general, and this happens regardless of the age of the silicon. So whether that's a CPU released in 2017 or a CPU released 6 years ago, they are noticing this impact across the board with the Windows Server OS. So why this is interesting for cloud gaming is because pretty much every cloud gaming service that I have tested, or all of them that I have tested, I guess, from Liquid Sky to Paperspace to running a cloud gaming server on Amazon's AWS, they all run the Windows Server OS. They do look very similar to the Windows desktop. So for Windows Server 2012, it looks very similar to Windows 8. And for Windows Server 2016, it does look very similar to Windows 10. But the cloud gaming hardware is running on the Windows Server OS. And I think that is due to licensing for Microsoft. But I digress, and I'm not going to dig too deep into that. But cloud gaming essentially takes part on the Windows Server OS. So it's simply due to that fact, there may be a higher level of impact on the performance simply due to that versus running on Windows 10 Standard or Windows 10 Pro with a traditional gaming computer. So I'm going to go ahead and dig into the results now and see if we are experiencing slowdowns, kind of how big these impacts are, and if it's something that I need to dig deeper into, or if it's just a minor impact that You might notice a couple frames being dropped or a couple frames less than you were experiencing, but not something that's going to completely have a huge impact on cloud gaming. So let's go ahead and jump to the results. All right, so before we dive into the results, I did want to talk about my testing process for today's video. So I ran 3D Mark's Firestrike benchmark to compare the results I get today to the results I got a couple months ago when I did a video on Paperspace versus Liquid Sky and performance utilizing Firestrike. I did run the test a couple times and took the average screenshot. So I took a screenshot every time I ran it, and then I just kept the screenshot that was in the middle of the results. There is a little bit of fluctuation between run to run, so I ran each benchmark 3 times just to get a decent average. There isn't a lot of fluctuation, just a little bit, but I did want to just run it multiple times in case there was a result that was like way out, outside of the norm for some reason or another. Also, Firestrike is a synthetic test, so the results from today's video might not be 100% indicative of what we'll experience in our cloud gaming, playing different games. And every game will use resources differently, so some games might be impacted heavier than others. But hopefully with the synthetic testing, we'll at least get a good starting ground, and hopefully it'll be a worst case scenario of what to expect with performance post Meltdown. So let's go ahead and dive into those results. Looking at the Liquid Sky gamer hardware tier, we saw a 8% drop in performance when comparing the pre-Meltdown results to the post-Meltdown results. This 8% drop is going from a final overall score of 6,991 to 6,434. This overall result, or overall performance loss, is a combination of a 11% drop in the graphics score, a 8% drop in the physics score, and interestingly enough, a only 2% drop in the combined score. Looking at the Liquid Sky Pro hardware tier, we saw a 7% performance loss when comparing pre-Meltdown to post-Meltdown. This 7% loss is due from going from a final score of 8,442 pre-Meltdown to a final score of 7,854 post-Meltdown for the Firestrike benchmark. This 7% overall score reduction is due to the result of a 10% decrease in the graphics score, a 12% decrease in the physics score, and a 5% decrease in the combined score. Seeing as Liquid Sky essentially provisions double the hardware when you go from gamer to pro, I was expecting the ratios to be pretty much identical, but we did see a little bit of difference in the ratios of what the different performance loss in the different subcategories of the Firestrike test. But in the end, the overall performance loss was pretty much identical when comparing the gamer hardware tier to the pro hardware tier with Liquid Sky hardware. All right, so switching gears from Liquid Sky hardware to Paperspace cloud hardware, I'm going to be looking at the P5000 hardware tier today. When I made the original video on Firestrike, I had also tested the GPU Plus hardware tier, but that has since been replaced by the P4000 hardware tier by Paperspace, which of course, as the name implies, runs the Quadro P4000. The GPU Plus runs the Quadro M4000, so that would not have been an apples-to-apples comparison. So I did not want to include that in today's video. Also, in more demanding games, I have tested with the P6000, but at the time when I made the Firestrike video, I did not test the P6000, so I have no data to compare the P6000 pre-Meltdown to the P6000 post-Meltdown. So for the Paperspace section of today's video, I will only have results to talk about with the P5000 hardware tier. The P5000 hardware tier from Paperspace seems to be the hardest impacted from the Meltdown patch, with a 12% overall performance loss when comparing pre-Meltdown scores to post-Meltdown scores. This 12% overall loss was a result of going from a final overall score of 14,213 to a final overall score of 12,469 for the post-Meltdown testing. This 12% overall loss was the result of a 12% decrease in the graphics score, a 4% decrease in the physics score, and a whopping 21% decrease in the combined score. This huge decrease in the combined score really surprised me, so I ran the test a couple extra times just to make sure that it was a legit decrease from the earlier test to what we're experiencing now, and it definitely is. I'm not sure what this will bode in the future for the Paperspace P5000. If for some reason the hardware configuration that Paperspace uses is impacted heavier with the Meltdown patch, or if there's something else going on behind the scenes that might be, improved with further patch updates down the road. But that's kind of the results I have seen so far. Before I wrap up this video, I did have a couple closing remarks. The first of which is I did want to emphasize once again that these are only synthetic benchmarks, and with that knowledge in mind, they might not be 100% indicative of what you'll actually experience in terms of performance loss with cloud gaming. Hopefully these results are worst case scenarios, if anything, and when we actually see the performance loss in games, they won't actually reach the points we actually reach in these benchmarks. And also every game might be impacted differently by Meltdown due to how CPU heavy they might be versus GPU heavy. And actually looking at the games itself might give us a little bit better insight, but hopefully at least with these synthetic benchmarks we can see what is hopefully a worst case scenario. On that note though, I will probably look at games I've already tested in the past and compare the data in those videos to what I get when I retest. I think Doom would be a great example simply because it is an older game. So it shouldn't have any recent game updates that increase the performance of the game itself. So if we do see any performance loss, that should be a good indicator that it is a performance loss due to the Meltdown patch. I will look at a couple other games that I've tested in the past. I would love to test Battlegrounds simply because it is very popular now, and a lot of people probably are wanting to try out cloud gaming with Battlegrounds. But it did like a month or so, or a couple weeks ago, I don't remember exactly when, but it had the big update to 1.0 that includes the new map, but it also includes a lot of performance updates. So we might not see any change in the performance between pre-Meltdown to post-Meltdown with Battlegrounds, but because the optimizations that they have done might kind of compensate for the performance loss that Battlegrounds would have experienced with the Meltdown patch. On that note though, I might do a video looking at Battlegrounds simply because it is a very popular game, and I do expect a lot of people might want to have older hardware that want to play it with friends, but don't want to have to spend the money to fully upgrade computers. So I might look at the new performance upgrades and see if they're worthy enough to do another video on that. But I don't want to include them in my Meltdown coverage simply because I don't think they would have accurate results for the video, simply because there have been a lot of optimizations with the game itself. I was halfway to testing Fortnite when Meltdown came out, so I'll probably start over on testing Fortnite for a future video, but I could probably use the data that I had collected for Fortnite for the follow-up video and compare what I had in the what I had collected at that point in time to what I collect when I retest Fortnite. All right, so hopefully this coverage on Meltdown was interesting, and hopefully it gave you a little bit more insight into how Meltdown might affect cloud gaming. So if you liked this video, give it a big like. I greatly appreciate that. Also, if you're not already an existing subscriber, smash that subscribe button to stay tuned for more great videos from Thought Provoking Tech. Until next time, Zach out.